First on BBC One.
Good evening and welcome to this Remembrance Day edition of the History CV of Britain, episode 43, I think. Yep. And in this episode, I'll be talking to John of Tadley about psychic history. Yes, you heard that right. John, a man of science, talking about psychic history. This should be very, very interesting. Apologies for last week if you watched. I'm afraid that Ralph's computer refused to play ball, and I was actually stuck in my Restream studio for 2 hours after the show finished, trying to troubleshoot with a Restream robot, which was an interesting experience. We got to we found out what the problem was in the end, thankfully. And the good news is that Ralph will be coming back on to give his Shakespeare authorship presentation on December the 7th. So that's 4 episodes time. So apologies for that. It was an interesting experience at this end. I quite enjoyed it. I can't imagine anybody else did, but thank you for watching anyway. There's lots and lots going on behind the scenes at the moment in terms of how this show moves forward. And in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I might have a very exciting announcement to make on that front. So do please stay tuned. Now, I have a question for everyone. As I did last week, I'm going to try and keep this up. So I think we'll call this new section Help Smithy Out. Now, I was on Facebook this morning and I was in a history group post, and somebody was suggesting that the word Wales means Romans. Now, this is a new one on me. I thought it meant foreigners, but maybe that's what they were alluding to, because the Romans, of course, would have been foreigners. I don't know. So my question this week is, what does the word Wales mean? So answers in capitals, please, along with your questions, so I can pick them out in the chat box. Brilliant. Right. Now, a quick thank you to Charles Evans Gunther, a previous guest on the show, who sent me this book very, very kindly. I really appreciate that, Charles. The Fighting Fifth. Now, this is a book about the First World War that Charles wrote, and I'm going to quickly read you the foreword, which is very short. And it says, in 1908, my great-grandfather, Basil Edwin Phillips, was instrumental in raising a local militia unit, the 5th Battalion, Flintshire, Royal Welsh Fusiliers. When Britain entered in the First World War, more local men joined up. Basil became a lieutenant colonel and commander of the unit, and in July 1915 sailed with the 5th to Gallipoli. On the 10th of August 1915, the 5th Battalion attacked Scimitar Hill, I think it's called. It was a baptism of fire for the men of Flintshire. On that day, Charles's great-grandfather led his men from the front, and before he was killed, he was heard to shout, "Come on, the Fighting Fifth." Here is the story of the men who fought, suffered and died during the Gallipoli campaign. It is hoped that this publication will go some way to recording and remembering the men who were commanded by my great-grandfather, Charles's great-grandfather. Excuse me. And there is a picture there. Sorry, this is really weird. Of Charles's great-grandfather there. That's quite a remarkable story. And I'm very much looking forward to reading this. There's some really good illustrations as well. I'm really looking forward to reading this after I finish The Coming of the Saxons by Tony Sullivan, who will be a guest on the show in a couple of weeks' time. Right, okay. So that's very fitting, really, that I received this in the week leading up to Remembrance Day. Okay, now talking to Charles Evans Gunther, Richard Johnson has interviewed him for a second time. This time the video is called King Arthur. Charles Evans Gunther discusses some of the sites. So I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. It was only uploaded yesterday, but I will be watching it tomorrow night, and I highly encourage you to do the same. Now, I interviewed somebody a couple of days ago, a chap called Philip White, who was sent my way by Adrian Gilbert. So thank you, Adrian, for that. And Philip has done his own research over many years into the Arthurian mystery, if you like. And he believes that he has located the real Avalon and is 3/4 of the way through writing a book on the subject. Excuse me. So it was a very good interview. Really enjoyed listening to Philip, and he's got some very interesting ideas. Hopefully that will be published later this week if I get time to edit it, because it's an audio only presentation. And later this week as well, I'll be talking to Ryan Seven for the second time. Ryan's got a book coming out hopefully very soon. I believe that it's mainly focused on ancient symbology. I hope I've got that right, Ryan, if you're watching. So that's something to look out for as well, because Ryan is a very, very gifted independent researcher. Okay, let's have a look in the chat box and see who we've got in the chat tonight in the ideas room. Hello, Merlin's boy. Good to see you, Merlin's boy. Bring it on, Smithy, indeed. Hello, David. Good to see you, David J. And Richard Johnson is live with us this evening. That's nice. Good to see you, Richard. And we've got What You Say is in the house. Stephen Lashbrook, my new mate on Facebook, is with us. Good to see you, Stephen. Good. Melissa Campbell is with us. Always good to see you, Melissa. Robert Paul Corliss. Marshall Abrahams is in the house. Ben Lee is with us. Good to see you, Ben. Susie Logan. Meg W. Good to see you, Meg. I can't believe that for 1 minute. I think he's talking about last week's show. I think he is. And Marshall, you're too kind. You're too kind. Thank you. Well, I mean, there's so much going on at the moment, but somebody suggested the idea after last week's show, bizarrely, that maybe I do that every now and again. If I was to do that, then it would be on a separate show, possibly a midweek, early evening show, something like that. And I'd have a very specific subject to talk to you all about. And it would be as interactive as possible. So I would need people in the chat box to help things along. So that's something that might happen in the new year. We'll have to wait and see. Where did I get up to? Daniela Holland is here. JC is here. Impressive initials, JC. Andrew Christie. Good to see you, Andrew. Brilliant. Okay. Right. Questions for John, please, in capitals. And if anyone wants to chip in with answers as to what does the word Wales mean, please put those in capitals as well, so I can see them in the chat. That really does help me out an awful lot. And it saves you having to watch me doing this for about 30 seconds. No one wants to see that, do they? Okay, right. I don't think I've forgotten anything for a change. So I think now is probably the time to bring on Dr. John Hart, otherwise known as John of Tadley. Hello, John.
Good evening.
Good to see you. It's been too long. It seems like ages since you've been in the hot seat, so it's great to have you back.
Thank you.
So,
A
John,
pleasure to be here.
sorry?
You can hear me, can you?
I can hear you loud and clear, yes.
Great.
So you've suggested this evening's topic, psychic history. John, you're a man of science, so what on earth is going on?
I'm interested in the concept of investigating history using unconventional means beyond the conscious mind. So what I mean by psychic history, I'm not going to give you a history of psychic research or supernaturalism or spiritualism or anything like that. We're looking at what to make of evidence acquired by non-rational processes.
Okay, that's very intriguing. So what has sparked your interest in this topic, John?
I reminded my wife that Richard III had been dug up from a car park in Leicester. And she said, was it a multi-story car park? And I said, yes, he was found on level 2. But in fact, he was found in a flat car park. And I don't know, I'm sure everybody knows this story, but it was the heroine of this saga, this digging up of the last English king of England, who was hacked to bits at the Battle of Bosworth Field in whenever it was, 1487, wasn't it? And the heroine is a lady called Philippa Langley. And she's what's called a Ricardian, somebody who wants to rehabilitate Richard III's reputation from Shakespearean crook back dick fame. And here's what it says on her Wikipedia entry, which I presume she wrote actually. So in around about 2004, Philippa Langley entered the car park, which was owned by Leicester Council, and at the northern end felt a strange sensation come over her, saying, I knew in my innermost being that Richard's body lay there. Coming back the next year in 2005, on completing the first draft of a play she's writing, she returned to the car park and experienced the same feeling when she looked down. Someone had painted a reserved R over the space, she recounted. It told me all I needed to know. And I loved that. I just thought, that's how to do archaeology, not all this spade stuff. So what she did was she did a load of fundraising, including crowdfunding. And she was a fantastic facilitator and inspirational figure. And the archaeological people at Leicester University then piled in, and they found this body with the twisted spine on the first day. So they didn't have to dig around all over the place. It was brilliant. Now, what I've got here for the scientific aficionados with my magic mirror to the fore, let's see if we can get this going. So where are we? There we go. I don't know whether you can see that actually. Can you see that?
Not really, if I'm honest. No,
don't worry about it. Well, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. This is a paper in a publication called Nature Communications. So that's the Nature thing, and it's the thing that came out of the effort to raise the remains of King Richard III. And it's a tour de force of science. It's full of absolutely everything you could possibly want in it. Anatomy, genealogy, historical records, DNA, of course, on the female line, DNA on the male line, DNA here, there, and everything. But the abstract of this is very curious, because the one piece of information you want, they don't put in the summary. And the one piece of information you really need is that there's a 99.999% likelihood that it's those remains of Richard III. And they arrive at that using a fancy statistical tool called Bayesian analysis. Now, so you've got this paper, right? Anybody can get this. It's online. Nature Communications is called Identification of the Remains of King Richard III. It's open access. You can have a look at it. So I checked it. So we remember it was Philippa Langley who found this, not these people. So is she one of the authors? No. Is she in the introduction? No. Is she in the acknowledgements even? And the acknowledgements run to about 2/3 of a column. So there's a lot of acknowledgees there. No. She says in her Wikipedia entry that she was sidelined. And what you've got here, frankly, is a piece of one-eyed scholarship, because they don't want to put something in about somebody who got there by intuition. I mean, she did a fabulous amount of work as a Ricardian historian, a revisionist, basically, but she did a tremendous amount of work. And she didn't even make it into the paper. And she was said that she was sidelined. And she's right. On the basis of this, I don't know much more about this case than this. She's absolutely right. But she did get an MBA for it, see.
Oh, good.
So, that was good. But so the question is, what is intuition? Well, this is not entirely irrelevant. There was a plumber we had, and he had a terrible problem because we had imperial and metric stuff, and there was old technology and new technology. And he just stopped work at 2:30 in the afternoon and said, I can't work this out. And he's an old guy, he's got plenty of wisdom and experience. And he just had to go away. And he slept on it. And in the morning, he arrived and said, I know exactly what to do. And when you sleep on something, this is why people ought to do this when they're emailing and doing all sorts of things. Don't do snap a response. What happens is, of course, your subconscious mind works on it. It's in a completely separate way. And if you look at a very simple model of the human psyche, I mean, I'm not even remotely qualified to talk about this, but I will nonetheless. You've got the conscious mind. That's what's addressing you at this moment. But you've also got the subconscious mind. And there's also people like Adrian Gilbert think there's yet another tier, which is described as the higher self, or the guardian angel. I've heard him say guardian angel. So my particular model is a naval one. You've got the conscious mind on the bridge. You've got the subconscious mind down in the engine room, running the body, a repository of memory, and also the repository of anything you could ever call paranormal. And then you've got your higher self, which is in the crow's nest, which is seeing you where you go, you see. And that's what that plumber did brilliantly, was use his subconscious mind. Don't just respond on the email, sleep on it.
Fabulous stuff. Okay. So Richard III, supported by a plumber,
I'm having a beer.
Are Exhibit A. So what are you offering, John, by way of Exhibit B?
Exhibit B, I've mentioned before, a book by J. Foster Forbes. Let me have another go with my mirror, because it didn't work well the first time, but you never know. It might work better this time. Let's have a look. You might, it doesn't seem to be working all that well, but there you go. It says The Unchronicled Past by J. Foster Forbes. And he published this on the eve of the Second World War. And what he did was, all through the book, he used the services of a psychometrist, right? So now psychometry is a kind of, as I understand it, is a mediumistic process where you divine from your surroundings or from physical objects messages of history. And he used a lady called Miss Olive Pixley, and she just told him, she sort of, resonated with the stone circles and all this, because this thing is all about the megaliths. And she told him that they were Atlantean. They were, there'd been a destruction of Atlantis and they'd come there. And that these people were able to use earth energies and celestial energies and solar energies and lunar energies and all these energies much better than we ever can. And that they use sound in some ways, so that she was able to resonate with this sound. Now, I love this sort of stuff because it's wonderful. And this book is hilariously good. But my favorite piece of psychometry involved the crime writer Agatha Christie, because as you know, she went missing. In 1926, she went missing, it was 10 days or something. And so they launched at her seances, but she wasn't dead, so there wasn't any actual point in that on the model that it's dead people who come to seances. So the best one, though, they did various of these, but the one that I liked most was the police, who never confess to using anything like this. But a chief inspector took one of the dear lady's gloves, which you can imagine are British silk and rather wonderful, and gave it to a bloke who claimed to be a psychometrist, but he didn't reveal whose glove it was. It wouldn't take a genius to realize, of course, but anyway, he didn't reveal it. And the psychometrist took the glove and said, Agatha will make herself known tomorrow. No, on Wednesday, that was it, on Wednesday, and she's completely unhurt. And that was exactly what happened. She turned up, she broke cover because she was just staying in a Harrogate hotel under a pseudonym, I think. And that is psychometry, and that I love that. So there you go.
The police have often employed psychics, haven't they, to try and crack murder cases, high-profile murder cases that they haven't been able to solve themselves. And if I remember rightly, there's been one or two occasions where that's solved the case. So, yeah,
that is absolutely true. But there's a case I read. You know the esotericist Colin Wilson. I think he's no longer with us now, but he wrote up a case where somebody, a man and his wife, I think it was the man who had a very vivid sense of where somebody was buried who had gone missing and presumed dead. And so the police went and dug it all up, and it turned out to be complete nonsense. And it was actually somewhere else. Colin Wilson wrote that case up, and it was incredibly convincing right up until the moment they found the real body, and then they found the real murderer. So you've got to be very careful, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so let's keep track with this. So that's Richard III, accompanied now by a plumber, and J. Foster Forbes, was it, with Agatha Christie on vibes. So who's up next, John?
Well, I think we've got to bring in John Michel. Whoa, I'm losing my books here. So this is just our standard one, The New View Over Atlantis.
One of my favourite books.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. It's a masterwork. It's an absolute masterwork. But I hope that you were with us. I know you went on the Mid Wales moot, with Druid Lawrence, Maine, and so on, and I was on that too. And at a certain point, we walked past the retirement home of Frederick Bligh Bond. Do you remember that? I don't know whether he was probably not on that day when you went off.
Possibly. Yeah, I was there for I think 4 days out of the 7. I think so.
Oh well, we went right past.
That's a shame.
The house of Bligh Bond. Now, Bligh Bond is, as you know, is a legend, and he was written up by John Michel in The New View Over Atlantis. So, in short, what Bligh Bond did was he was retained as what was he? He was chief archaeologist or something, or site director or something in 1907 at Glastonbury Abbey, and he was tasked by the Church of England, who were running it, to dig it up in the interest of culture and in the interests of tourism. And he was unerringly successful. Everywhere he dug his spade, he found the edge of a building or something or other. And as John Michel describes, it was fantastic. It was all these sacred numbers and geometry, and he revealed all this. But then he did something which clever people sometimes do, to my total despair. I've probably done it myself. Is he did something clever, silly. And what he did was he wrote a book. Now, a book is a very hard thing to do, so you wonder why he bothered. But anyway, he did, and he blew the gaff on himself. He said that he'd been receiving messages from dead monks by automatic writing, and all his circle were doing this. All his mates were getting this stuff in the authentic language. And he reproduces in the book. And the Church of England had a thermonuclear moment over this, because they don't go in for spiritualism. Obviously, they go in for all that, they go in for spirituality, but not spiritualism. And so they made his life hell, and eventually he left embittered And he wrote another couple of books. And then John Michel comes along, years later, and writes it up. And it's a tremendously good story. I completely failed to tell you something when I did Foster Forbes, because Foster Forbes, in the words of John Michel, it sort of worked out this absolute central enigma of the megaliths. An outstanding feature of prehistoric life, John Michel writes, paradoxical to our present way of thinking, is that men capable of building structures implying a very high degree of engineering and scientific knowledge should have built none of those which we now consider indispensable to a state of civilization: large stone houses, palaces, ports, warehouses, prisons, and fortresses. He should have added pubs. That's the other thing. But anyway, so that was one thing I was going to bring you from John Michel. But let me just go back to Bly bombs. So we're back in there in the 1920s by the time he finished his stuff. There are many who believe that genuine knowledge of the past can be gained by mystical techniques, writes John Michel. Bly bombs' successful use of automatic writing during his Glastonbury excavations is an example of what can be achieved by such means. Other examples are given by the archaeologist Dowser T.C. Lethbridge, who describes in several of his books how he learnt to identify and date ancient artifacts by the use of a diviner's pendulum. Now, he says Lethbridge was unique among modern archaeologists in acknowledging stone circles, a sense of natural energy of which the ancients were also aware. But I remember, again, on that mid-Wales trip, I don't know if you saw this bit, but somebody, actually, I don't know. Anyway, somebody was using a dowsing pendulum to establish the right and wrong of an argument. And the pendulum, I was within about 2 feet of this, so I did see it, went at a very strange angle, an improbable angle, pointing at the wrong person. So it got wrong. It made a mistake. And I thought, you see, the thing about these, I mean, first of all, you've got to just enjoy all this stuff about intuitions and, seances and everything. Just take it as hypotheses coming in, because sometimes you really don't know what the age of an artifact is. And I think what Lethbridge did was, waggle his thing along a chronology, and it said there. Now, I stood next to Druid Lawrence, and you missed this one because this was South Downs, and he wanted to know what the age of a yew tree was in a church graveyard. It's a whacking great tree. I mean, I could have guessed, something, but who knows? Anyway, he had dowsing rods, and he just said, "Are you 1,000 years old? Are you 800? 600? Are you 500?" And it went like this, at 500. And he said, "It's 500 years old."
Far be it from me to be skeptical, but how would a tree know how old it is? Does it have a calendar?
No, the thing about that kind of thing is that it gives you a start. I mean, our culturists will tell you how old it is anyway, and you can do there are scientific tests on this kind of thing. But what you want to do when you're doing history is you want to tip off as to where you're supposed to look. That's what this T.C. Lethbridge did, because he had artifacts and he didn't have a clue what date they were. I mean, he could be plus or minus 1,000 years. How do you know? And so you get this tip, and then you go. So now you're looking for your triangulated evidence. You want 3 reasons for believing things if you're in the science game. So then you go to your church records, your Masonic records, any records about somebody sticking a yew tree, and that's so you use it. I just use these stuff. I mean, I'm not a pendulum user. I have done dowsing, but that's not really my line, of course. But the one I was interested in, because we were down there on South Coast, down the South Downs, and there is something called the Long Man of Wilmington. Now, this is a shortcut figure, and it's a bit like one of those murder pictures where you just got the outline, and the guy has 2 staves. Now, the guy who was showing us this I don't know if this is going to come out. It probably won't, but I'll put that right up in front. Oh, well, no, maybe you can see that there. Can you see that picture at the top?
Yes.
The Long Man of Wilmington. And can you see there's a stave on each hand there? And can you see that diagonal shadow? Now, the camera is reversing it for us, but it's the other way around. When there's an equinox at the Long Man of Wilmington, the shadow of the surrounding terrain actually goes from the top of one stave to the bottom of the other. But it's even more remarkable than that, because at a certain point, just before the light is lost, two eyes appear in the middle of the face and a mouth, and we saw that too. Wow. And you can see how they did it, because they've got a shaft of light coming that way, and they'll have two micro hillocks on either side of the eyes and one on the other side of the mouth, and you just think, this is sublime. The bloke who told us all about this, I hope I haven't stolen his thunder, incidentally. Also, he was painting things. I'm going to block myself out now. He was painting things and selling them in order to self-publish a book. And this is his own picture. This guy is called Stuart Mason. Now, the problem with Stuart
I know the name,
Yeah, well, he's very good. His book, if he's careful, will be storming. But he hasn't got a clue when this chalk cut figure was cut. He hasn't got a clue. And so I said to him, well, and indeed Lawrence, I said, why don't you just all do some dowsing and get some ideas, then get your evidence. Particularly if, say, 3 dowsers came up with the same number, but then just go there. Because at the moment, he gave a talk where he couldn't tell us anything about it, anything. They didn't know why they'd done it. And what they've done is they shortcut this figure, and then they terraformed the surrounding hill so that it would, you get these shadows and things. And yet they don't build, a hostelry that you could go to afterwards after you've done your chalk cutting. So that was Stuart Mason. And I thought, well, there you go. I'll just get the dowsing rods out or a pendulum, But don't take it too seriously. But it would be very handy if it was, if it led to a line of inquiry. Because that's what happened with the Richard III thing, is that Philippa Langley has this intuition, and then they get an absolutely cracking paper out of it, and they all become famous. They forget where they got it from. And I'm like, no, I would never have done that. I wouldn't have given her authorship, but I would definitely have got her in the acknowledgements and given her full enthusiasm. I hate churlishness. So anyway, that's a little spiel on whatever I was talking about.
Absolutely fascinating. I'll just put this comment quickly up on the screen. Smithy, be careful next time you're close to a tree. They would have listened to your comment. So I don't have an issue or a problem with the concept of a tree having a spirit. But I just find the idea of a tree knowing how old it is quite odd. But there we go.
But you've got to understand that the as it were, the mainstream will do almost anything not to admit that they use any kind of techniques like this at all. In science, of course, it's famous. You dream your structure of benzene, or you dream your periodic table. Like Mendeleev. Kekule was the first one of them. Mendeleev, but Druid Lawrence told me that he'd seen a very famous, indeed renowned archaeologist using dowsing rods. He was doing it very covertly at a site, but he was using dowsing rods. And Lawrence gave me the initials of this individual, thinking I wouldn't know who it was. It took me a while, Then I hit it, and I said to him, I gave his name to Lawrence, and Lawrence said, I didn't tell you that because he doesn't want to damage the bloke's career, which is what will happen if he's known as a dowser. But he was dowsing.
Crazy.
Great fun.
Another comment quickly on the Wilmington man. Alfred Watkins considered the Long Man of Wilmington was a depiction of a dodman. They laid out the lays and the staves are sighting rods.
Yep, that's absolutely right. He was big on Alfred Watkins was big on that, and there's alignments with churches and all sorts of things, and it's fascinating. And why mainstream archaeologists don't pile in on all this material, I don't know really. I would.
Okay, John, that's exhibit A, B, and C now. Do we have an exhibit D at all?
We do. I mean, we're back with Druid Lawrence. Now, what I've been saying to Lawrence for some time is that he needs to provide new historical evidence on his past lives, because he has past lives. He can recollect them by the minute. He's actually got a fantastic memory, as you know, historical memory. He always knows absolutely everything. And he said, just to give you an example, he actually has written up. He hasn't written up the one I want him to write up, which is Robert of Gloucester, but because I want to know what Geoffrey's book was. He said, I just want to know, and Robert of Gloucester should know that. Now, this is King Arthur's Camlan, Lawrence Main, and this is Lawrence writing up King Arthur, the 500s King Arthur, the Ap Murag chap. And he said to me that he gave the exact day on which the Battle of Camlan occurred, and said he asked me, because I've got a computer and he hasn't. He said, was that a Thursday? I'm not kidding you. He said, was that a Thursday? So I looked it up. You can get this information effortlessly these days. And it was Thursday. And he said, then he says he was a druid in 3000, around about 3100. And there was a solar eclipse. Could I confirm that it was a solar eclipse? Now, what I did there was I just sent him all the solar eclipse material, and he's really got to think about whether. But he says he's not going to read it until he's done some more dreaming, because so not to pollute his thing. But then he's done me also a little screed on Robert of Gloucester. Now, this is the one I actually want, and he wanted to know what am I sending him on that. So I'm going to just send him all the Wikipedia stuff. But again, he's only going to refer to it once he's done his past life thing. And what we're looking for in all this are, new information. I mean, the Battle of Camlan was first fought on Thursday, the something or other. I haven't read that anywhere else. I mean, that is a sensational piece of information. And if you could find another way of validating it, another two ways would be even better. That would be sensational. He's got, if you're interested in reincarnation, you can believe in reincarnation. But a famous philosopher who I've been struggling for a couple of days to remember his name, looked into reincarnation, and he came to the conclusion, and he was quite a famous, skeptic. He said that either reincarnation is true or the paranormal is true, because there's a whole load of people out there who have got information that they shouldn't have. And the book if anybody wants to read about reincarnation, this is the book for you. But it's not so very new now. It's quite a long time ago. You can see it says Exploring Reincarnation, Hans ten Dam. That, as far as I know, is the best book ever written on reincarnation.
Brilliant. I've not come across that one before.
Well, it was in a series, and the series actually wasn't particularly impressive, but there's always one, a corker, and this was the corker in it, Exploring Reincarnation. I mean, he's got all the information, because there's a very famous scientist who got involved in it called Ian Stevenson. You probably heard of him. And he did absolutely tons of stuff on that. But you see, the thing is, sorry, you were going to say.
I was just going to mention that's how they appoint, if you like, a Dalai Lama, isn't it? It's they go looking for somebody that believes they were the Dalai Lama in a previous life, and then it has to be proven several times. And so they believe.
That's exactly what they do.
I've also read that in the New Testament, in the very early days, reincarnation was mentioned by Jesus as well, apparently, and then it was taken out of the Bible.
That's right. I
don't know.
No, I think that's absolutely true. I think there's the model that you have now from the Christians is one life and one soul. But actually, you don't get that. It's a totally different idea comes from the Polynesians, who are very good on the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And they say that if you get a poltergeist phenomenon, what you've got there is an out of control lower self, which shouldn't be wandering around throwing things and doing all sorts of things. Now, on that subject, I've met 2 Christian exorcists. One of them, the one from Brighton, was a real absolute corker. He said the classic thing he would do, this was a good few years ago, but anyway, his conversation stays in my mind, as you can imagine. He said the classic thing you'd go to do, he said, you go to this, say, a terrace house in Brighton, old Brighton town, and there would be this family group outside, and they'd be pale, and a daughter would be weeping, and they'd all be shaking. And then he'd take out his crucifix and go in through the door, and then a wardrobe would launch itself at him as he came down, as he went up the stairs. And they are full of stories like that, these guys. And the other guy I met at a party, and he had the same sort of stories. And you see, the thing about scientific materialism is it's exactly the box of tools you need when you want to work out the remains of Richard III or any scientific problem. But it's completely useless when you come across something totally bizarre like that. Another one of these paranormal things is levitation. If you want to have your mind blown, read up on St. Teresa of Avila. She used to go into ecstatic trances, and she would just float off her bed, and the nuns in her nunnery would have to pull her back down again. And you think, well, this is ridiculous. This can't be true. But there's hundreds of people saw this. And then there was even more public, because that was at least in a nunnery, was Joseph of Cupertino, who you've undoubtedly heard of. In fact, John Michel wrote that one up. And he was famous for going into religious trances and sort of floating up to the altar or floating up into a tree. And the person who saw him was, well, one of the many, was Gottfried Leibniz, the calculus man. So, I mean, he was a top mathematician, not some gullible person from Tadley. He was a really, an international celebrity. And he just went, what? And you see, the thing about scientific materialism, it only needs to encounter one act of levitation. And of course, we've got D.D. Hume in Victorian times, was famous for floating out of windows and floating in other windows and doing all sorts of things. In fact, one of his party pieces, I always love this one, is that he could expand, he could grow, he could get taller. And what they would do is they get the 6 biggest blokes available and they would just hold him. And then he would grow in spite of being grappled, and he would just grow, 6-8 inches or something. And he could do all sorts of things like that. Now, you only need one thing like that, and it just throws scientific materialism into the bin. You've got to come up with a more sophisticated understanding of the human psyche. I said poltergeist to the lower self. If you got a middle self possibly connected to a lower self, you get a ghost. You see, that's where you get your ghost hauntings. And as you know, there's been loads of pictures taken of them. They're always called, fakes and all this sort of stuff. But I'm very relaxed about all this. When I was at school, we had a religious studies master who was a magnificent guy, Dr. Keep, who was a Methodist minister. And he gave me a book about the Trianon Gardens haunting. Now, I don't know if you know about that one, but
no.
In 1901, a couple of very respectable English ladies went to Paris, and they walked out into the Trianon Gardens, and they saw what they thought was Marie Antoinette dressed as a shepherd and all her courtiers, because Marie Antoinette famously, as you know, ran a little farm, hobby farm. I don't suppose she did much digging or anything like that, but and they had a complete experience. It was a time slip, one of those time slip experiences. And Mr. Keep, Dr. Keep, gave me the book. And he was trying to blow my mind. I know he was trying to do it because, of course, I was into science. I did other things too, but he thought, right, I'll destabilize him. And I wasn't in the least bit destabilized, because I'm a great admirer of aquatic small aquatic organisms like plankton. They're called plankton, as you well know. And they just float with the current. And Aristotle, who wasn't addressing marine organisms, but were talking to human beings, said you don't actually need to make a decision about things. And I call this being planktonic. So when Druid Lawrence, because I went up this his dreaming mountain in Pembrokeshire, and he checked me out. What are your views? And I said I'm a planktonist, and he said well, it takes all sorts. So anyway, I'm a planktonist. I don't need to worry if there's reincarnation. There is, but I think information is arriving, and we should use it. And
absolutely,
in my science, if somebody wrote to me and said, here's the solution of your scientific problem, I wouldn't sideline them. I'd take them out to a decent supper if they came up with the right answer. Obviously, I mean, if they didn't, that's where it is. But the idea of being churlish, and one-eyed fellas are hopelessly churlish about unconventional sources of information, whereas we as independent researchers, we're like Philippa Langley, we should just be open to it, but use it as a jumping off point or a hypothesis. It's not a finished job, is it, when somebody's using a dowsing pendulum, which goes off at a funny angle? As I say, I've actually seen that. It's really quite weird.
I can imagine. All of that was very thought-provoking, John, and it sparked a memory. I'm trying to remember all the story now. I might struggle, but there was an Italian priest in the, I guess, maybe the 1930s or 40s, and he was very famous for stigmata. Thousands of people from around the world would come and see him, and he'd come out with the wounds and etc. But he was also supposed to be able to levitate. And I think it was during the Second World War, he appeared in the sky in front of a German plane. And the German pilot actually witnessed and told this story that he saw. It was something like Pinot.
No, it's Padre Pio. Padre Pio. That's it.
Yes, I think it's him. Yeah, and that's another fascinating story.
Yeah, he's very famous.
Highly encourage people to check that out. Another one that I thought you may have mentioned is this guy, Edgar Cayce, the story of Jesus. Now, I first came across Cayce not through the Jesus stuff, but through Atlantis. He gave hundreds of sittings on Atlantis, and he said that there would be this road, and it was just off the coast of Cuba, and people would find it in 1968, and he was talking in the 1930s, and sure enough, in 1968, the Bimini Road was discovered as predicted by Cayce to the very year.
Brilliant. I think that's just
so, I mean, how do you do that? There's definitely something going on.
Well, they do say that if you do surveys of people, one of the things that lots of people get are very small premonitions, where they think somebody's going to ring or somebody, all this sort of thing. It's very common, but that was a big premonition. that was a major one.
Okay, before I ask John my last question for the evening, I'm just going to quickly go through the chat to see if we have any questions in capitals. We'll probably be rounding up in about 5 or 10 minutes. So if you've got a question for John or myself, who knows, please put it in capitals in the chat box. I think I saw a couple flicking through. What's this? We've had a comment from Gulag Richard Johnson, who has said, when misused, psychic practice could be weaponized to deny real evidence, promote falsehoods, and ultimately manipulate. What measures can be taken to stop this? Thinking about cult-like history groups.
You've got to deploy rigor for a kickoff, and you've got to be very skeptical of anything that comes in. I mean, you don't need to give illegitimate allegiance to anything, because what you're looking for is additional lines of evidence so that you can infer to the best explanation. That's what you're doing. We don't, in the historical space, you don't do deductions and induction. You tend to do this inference to the best explanation. And all you're doing is you're just feeding everything in, really. So you shouldn't, somebody, if your only source, when Edgar Casey says it's, the Bimini roads are going to be dug up in 1968, you can just be planktonic about that until 1968 when they find it. Then you go, whoa, that's cool.
Yeah, just a bit. Okay. Merlin's boy has said, with dowsing, the question and how it's framed is crucial.
That's exactly right. Well, on my very humble experience, I think that's absolutely true. Druid Lawrence once said to himself something. He did a one with me. He said, "Is John Hart a white witch?" Yes. I thought, whoa. And then he said, then he asked a difficult question of another person, and the dowsing rods went like this. And then Lawrence said, "Oh no, wait a minute! I got that question. It's too confusing. I put a double negative in it or something. I mean, done something like that. You got dowsing. You've got to be very clear what you're trying to achieve."
I suppose the skeptic would say that that's that person's mind manipulating the rods, possibly.
But there's no problem with that.
Okay.
There's no problem with that interpretation. You don't have to show. You just be planktonic about it. What you want to know is what the information is. It doesn't matter if it's coming from somebody's, subconscious mind. Well, that's fine. I mean, I think you've got to ask yourself, Philippa Langley finds the mortal remains of Richard III. How did she do that? I mean, you can go woo, intuitional, but you can also say she was processing it with her subconscious mind. And you don't need to it's the information we want. And the provenance is less important.
Absolutely. Okay. Merlin's boy said, spirit can become matter and matter can become spirit.
No, I can't do that. I do have a little spirit here. That's a little spirit.
Merlin's boys followed up with, Robert Temple is a good example of using the paranormal to locate real books around the world. He says he feels the book's heat. He has over 50,000 books. It's
very strange how, for example, books come into your life when you need them. I remember being in a library in Surrey myself, and I was tracking something down, and somebody pushed a book on one side of a stack, and this other book came out, and it was the book I was looking for. And and I just thought, that is so clever. I love it. And it's so strange. Also, the same is true for people you meet and what people say and so forth. If you're thoroughly in tune, it's partly to do with this bridge engine room crow's nest thing, because your crow's nest is working out your future pattern, as Adrian has concluded. And it will put things in your way, and that's how it's done.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Okay. Sometimes the universe smiles on us. Okay. Do you have a culminating exhibit, John?
I do. And it's very cognate with your own, the gift of whatever it was, the one Gallipoli book from Charles E.G. And what I've got here is a book that was written by a pal of mine, actually. And it's called Mountain Gunner, The Wartime Adventures of Tony Fowle, MC, Military Cross, 1939 to 1951. And the author is Rupert Willoughby. And Rupert is one of the founding members of the National CV group of British historians, of which I'm a member. And you are an honorary member too. And this bloke had a remarkable career, because he ended up doing something like Rudyard Kipling, and went into the high Himalayas, well, in the northwest frontier of India, with these guns that you screw together, and then you bombard tribesmen, because they're such a blooming pain, these tribesmen. They're always shooting each other, and the British Empire didn't want this, so they sent him up there to do this. But what Rupert had as his base resource was 253 letters that this bloke had written to his parents. And it's like, you see, this is the historical problem in the microcosm. he'd written 253 letters to his parents. Now, his father was a vicar. And can you imagine writing to your parents, and one of them's a vicar, and you're not necessarily going to mention every amorous arrangement or every binge down the officer's mess, are you? You're not. It's going to. So what Rupert had to do is take what was in effect a dried meal and reconstitute it, and he's done it to magnificent effect, using all sorts of other stuff all over there. But in it, I mean, there's wonderful gems here all over the place. I mean, for example, if you've got mules and you come under bombardment, as this guy was over and over again, the mules will just tuck their ears, do their ears like this. But the horses will stampede. So you don't want to be on a horse when the artillery shells come in. I mean, this is Northwest Frontier stuff. So this is, carry on up the Khyber, if you've ever seen that. Yeah. It's just pure. It's unbelievable. But he's got, at one point, he goes up with the Jeep. He manages to get this Jeep to go up this mountain. And the tribesmen have never seen a Jeep. First of all, they run away. And then they come back and put grass in front of it to feed it. And this is 1948 or something, 1947, and they've never seen motorized transport. But I reckon the best thing in the whole book is that he had a teacher. They all learned Urdu. The idea that the British Empire was racist, for example, is cobblers. The officers and men loved one another, and they learned Urdu and all this sort of stuff. And this Urdu teacher had an odd story to tell. An English officer had said goodbye to his wife because his wife was going to visit some friends. And the Memsahib didn't come back. And weeks passed, and he all over the place. So, the British Empire, you couldn't lose a Memsahib. It's just ridiculous. An officer's wife, where's she gone to? And the Urdu teacher, who he shared with this officer who was, lacking his wife. And the Urdu teacher said, I'll go to the tribe, the Pashtuns, because there's a bloke there who can see things. And so he went there and he told him this problem that this officer had lost his wife. And the bloke went into a trance and said, she's run off with another officer, but she now regrets it and is seeking to apologize and to be taken back. She will provide a telegram tomorrow, and it will say this. What then happened, according to this Urdu teacher, was exactly that. He received the thing next time, sorry, I ran off with this other bloke. So now so that's the story. Now we go back to the person here, his name is Tony Fowle. And Tony Fowle has the same Urdu teacher sometime later. And he thinks, can this be true? So he goes and finds this officer who's been cuckolded, basically. It must have been a delicate conversation. You can imagine. And he will have said to him, well, is this true? Did you get this information, this telegram? And it turned out to be true. And you see, this is the sort of paranormal thing. I don't know if you've been to in India, but they do this like falling off a log there. I mean, everything is full of spirituality and universal consciousness and everything. It's a wonderful place to go. It's full of spirit. But so you got in this thing, you see, the thing I'm mentioning about this is historical imagination. You've got to imagine, and it's an imaginative thing. You've got to imagine what went on. What would they have thought when, whatever happened? And so that's the exercise of the historical imagination, which doesn't have a lot to do with the rational mind, though you need all that rational input, of course. Mm-hmm. That's that, but that also happens to have a paranormal story, which made me laugh. So there you go.
Brilliant.
That'd be a lesson to you.
I've really enjoyed this. This has been very thought-provoking and very illuminating. Thank you, John.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I'll be doing some automatic writing later on this evening.
in the voice of a 12th century monk.
Hopefully, yeah, that'd be nice.
Isn't that wonderful? You could just write your book overnight, and you wake up and there's another chapter.
Well, that's what Alistair Crowley did, apparently. He used to do lots of automatic writing, and some of his books were written that way, I think. Yeah.
Good. Good technique. Good technique.
Okay. One final comment from Merlin's boy. Body dowsing never lies. Stand up and still and relax. Say peace to yourself and see what happens. Wise words, Merlin's boy. Thank you for that. Where do you buy dowsing rods? Where do you get them from?
I haven't a clue. I've only
No,
ever
me
touched.
neither.
I've only ever touched them once.
Yeah. Okay. Perhaps next week, somebody, if you know how to acquire dowsing rods,
I think you
please
just
let
go
me know.
online.
Yeah, I could try doing that. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Right. Well, we're all done now. So thank you for joining us. Please join me again next week when my guest will be Marshall Abrahams, the return of
Yay.
Marshall.
Excellent.
And we'll be discussing Troy on the Gog Magog Hills. So look out for that. And while I must also mention, I'm afraid that Matt Apocalypse, a former guest on the show, had a rather nasty accident a couple of weeks ago, a car accident, and he'll be recuperating now in hospital for probably a few months' time. So get well soon, Matt. We love you. You're a very gifted chap. If you're watching this, get well soon. And you're welcome back on the show anytime. Okay. Thanks for watching, everyone.